failures are efficient, and especially if you have them early enough and you can recognize. And I think this is the other negotiation you have to go through. Did I fail because this just was maybe structured incorrectly? Should I try again? Should we try in different ways? And so I think you need to make those assessments as sterilized as possible so the next iteration can be far more for productive. And you can't make it emotional because you make it think like you failed or maybe it was a bad idea. Maybe what I was thinking was unreasonable, but as long as you can kind of get past that and try it again or do the alternate approach, you can move forward. But I've seen people that just will take a failure and that becomes the reason why they haven't moved forward.
Yeah.
And I think you have to disrupt that.
Welcome back to the Wire Garage with Pops, where we usually get pretty nerdy and about tech and IT operations. But now we're going to go under the hood of something a little different, the life and the story behind the leader. So my guest is Chad Mattix, founder of CEO of Kinnetix. And it's an IT field services company whose teams support customers around the world. He's built a values-driven organization with people across multiple countries. And he's done it while trying to stay grounded as a husband and a dad and a friend. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about the experiences that shaped him, those hard lessons, and what's it like to lead people in multiple cultures. And because this is Wired Garage, we are also going to share a few stories about probably some cigars, bourbons, maybe some other things, music along the way. So Chad, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So here we go. When you think back to your childhood, what's a snapshot that really sums up what you were as a kid?
When I was a kid, I always did things that were pretty entrepreneurial. I had a paper route, and I think about that as being a big contributor to, I tried to acquire more routes. I would have 350, 400 Sunday paper delivery. I had to do collections. It would be rain, snowing, and kind of just going through that whole cycle of just getting things done. And I always felt like that was a big contributor to never giving up, or at least understanding perseverance and how to communicate with people, trying to collect money, putting those things together. And so I think that paper route was a big influence in my life. And I think other things that even when I went through school, as I got involved in sports, or if I looked at different things, I always was drawn into building things. And so my dad got early into the whole ham radio and custom PC build. And so I learned a lot about computers with my father and just building them from the ground up. I went to Comdex back in Atlanta when it first started. So way before I even was out of high school, I'd gone through a lot of those different types of tech events. And that just influenced me being in technology. Even though when I graduated from college, I had a degree in finance, I never really pursued that. I did in tech.
Did you have any early role models that had a big impact on how you lead or make decisions?
Yeah, there's been a couple people in my life. My father passed away a couple years ago now, and I think in hindsight, looking at that, he had a lot more influence in my life than probably what I had recognized for the things I just had described. He, encouraged me. He was a paper boy, so I did that. We bought TRS-80s, brand new computers. We'd build these things, send me off these conferences. He just always did that type of building things with me. That did a lot. Even when I started my first company and I'm graduating from Miami and I'm explaining to my family that I'm not going to get a job, I'm going to build this company. He helped me start it. I mean, just was part of that. So it was really an encouragement to that. And then as I was kind of getting into the industry, and I think this will be a name, Brian, that I worked, kind of competed with a guy. His name was George Kingston. They had a Rippy in Kingston. And George spent a lot of time with me. And still to this day, like every year or two, we'll get together. And he's always been this wise, guiding principle of what course I'm going through, why are you doing things this way, and just thinking about that stuff. And so there's been a few people like that have been very anchoring. And maybe just add one more to this. I went to Miami, and this is before they have an entrepreneurship minor, and I got involved in programs, and Miami helped me with an independent study that kind of helped me graduate, used what I was doing with this company called Pinnacle. So there's even like marketing classes where I got independent credits for that to help graduate. And there's a guy named Rick Forsyth that donated a lot of money to Miami and some of the entrepreneurship initiatives that are out there. And I was going through just really negative, like, this is the end, and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I go to Chicago and meet Rick. And so Forsyth has since been sold, and I forget who is part of now. I don't know if you guys even remember Forsyth, but it was a big, you know, $300-400 million IT service provider. And I go in there and sit in his office, and I tell him about all these things and how bad it is. And like, man, I just don't know what to do. And he's just saying, hey, if you're going to pick this path in life, you got to learn to deal with it. And he offered almost not, he didn't, I guess I'd say he didn't offer any, hey, you're going to be okay. Or, woe is you. He just told me, you got to dig in and you got to get around this. I mean, you got to persevere, or don't do this. Don't choose something that you're not willing to have that resiliency. It was so direct, raw, that he ended up being right. Like, if you're going to do something, you got to make sure you have that endurance to complete it. So I think the enablement of my father and taking risk and learning how to build things and getting sort of that financial structure guidance from George Kingston to the more just in your face, like, be aware of what you're doing and don't complain about the environment that you are knowingly putting yourself into, was really grounding. And I think those are big influences in my life.
I think when we met, I joined Coolidge as help desk, I believe, in the very beginning, and became IT director pretty quickly. But I felt like, oh my gosh, what I get myself into, because I didn't have much experience. And Steve Dinicky was that leading hand that probably didn't tell me so much technology what to do, but he taught me how to be professional, how to reach people. And, like when he would go into a meeting, he never sat in 12, 3, 6, 9 positions. He always sat on that odd, because he didn't want to assert himself in that meeting as I'm the person. No, he brought more people in than just him for that reason of gaining that information and value from all of the people.
Yeah.
So he would even sit against the window sometimes with a furnace register, sometimes, and just you would never know that he was that guy. He was a director, and then he would do interviews, your annual reviews. He would sit beside me instead of across from me at a desk, and it was just so disarming in a sense, right? And just taught me just how to value people and empathy and things. And I think that carried me further than all the technology changes in life, because I think I could handle that. It was the
Yeah.
people piece that I would struggle with. And so I just think you're right. I mean, George Kingston, great people person, new business, but new people, and knew how to sell or deliver.
Yeah. What we learn from meeting, observing good, and maybe challenging people all add to the fabric of who we are. And so even if it's, stressful situations, they can be just as contributory to helping you in your future. So like you said earlier, I mean, I think getting that interaction with people is the most important thing you can do, because it helps you navigate through all these different, you learn it's going to be okay. You learn some of those nuances. You learn how to assert yourself in ways that can help bring people together and not always be disruptive or trying to blow things up.
Right.
There's subtlety sometimes that can really go a long way of getting through maybe difficult conversations.
Or just people knocking you in the back of the head and taught you a lesson. I had a couple of those, where they would like say, you don't belong in the position you're in because you don't, know law firms, and I had to think, I was ticked in the very beginning of that. And as I'm driving home, they're thinking, well, they're probably right. And I just had a different engagement with the attorneys just to get to know the practice of law, what they were doing day to day. And now my technology can meet them there.
Yeah.
Instead of selling it at the counter level, right? I'm selling it now in the field. Like, that's where the value is. And you're right. I mean, it's just all different types of ways that people can lead you to where we are today. So road to entrepreneurship. So we're out of early life and family now. So what was the moment or series of moments that pushed you to actually take the leap as a junior at Miami University to starting your own company? What was that moment or series of moments that made you want to do that?
Yeah, I started building computers for students. I was doing some of these things just out of my dorm room. I was having PC support issues. My dad would help me resolve some of these things. I started helping other people that are out there. And I found an office for rent on Walnut Street near Uptown. And I just decided to rent an office. And I just had a card table and a desk, and I started making brochures, and I was sending it around. And then all of a sudden I was helping some insurance companies, some law firms, some accounting firms. So I want to say it was intentional, but not, I was just going to do this while I was trying to get through school
Was this in Cincinnati or Oxford?
in Oxford. I did
In
this all in
Oxford.
Oxford.
Wow.
Yep. Not much competition there. And
Yeah.
so I was able to do that. And then I got a contract with the city of Oxford, and I started doing some work with Miami. And that's where it all kind of started. Met my wife there, and then she started working at Great American Life. So she was commuting literally from Oxford to Cincinnati, and I'm trying to make a run at this. And things just kind of happened. And I'll tell you even how the law firms, so I started working with law firms. It's just funny because this is how life works. But I started working on WordPerfect. So law firms, it was all about WordPerfect, learning the macros. And then WordPerfect gets acquired by Novell. So I'm starting to do all of this networking and tying that together. And GroupWise comes out. So we're starting to integrate all these things together for the law office using WordPerfect. Then Soft Solutions became these document management systems. So then I moved out of Oxford because everything was in Cincinnati, and we moved into the Kroger building, which is right there on Court Street and Vine Street. And we started an office there. And it's just, I willed my way into it. And in my ignorance of, the lack of capital, the marketing information, the budgeting information, the road mapping, it just kind of just happened. So over time, I started to iterate into that role. And Miami helped support that. I mean, they encouraged me with resources and building plans and challenging things. And so, like you said before, this is our third year in a row being in the Red Hawk 50. Also, this is our fifth year being in the Inc. 5000. And I take the greatest pride in the Red Hawk 50 just because that school helped make that happen.
Right.
And now you look at the resources, and entrepreneurship is a degree. It's encouraged, because you're learning all these different skill sets. I find most people are very entrepreneurial, and you learn a little bit of everything. You learn the accounting, you learn the IT, that's just the way work is going. So I think it's became this natural progression for me.
Was there a time early on where you questioned whether you made the right choice and what kept you going? Was there a moment of doubt before you got that contract?
Yeah, I think, boy, it's a good question, because even now I pursue opportunities and we're moving ourselves into a bigger theater of scale. And you still want to make sure that you are able to deliver what you tell people to deliver. So whether it was George Kingston or whatever it is, what you really wanted to protect was your integrity. So you don't want to say or do things that you can't do. So as you're stretching and getting to that next level, I think that was always the conflict. Like, how do we make sure we're going to do what we're saying we're going to do? And I mean, there's been a couple of times where, 2001, that was a tough economic time. And I end up selling the business to get funding effectively. And I always felt like I was on this edge of, man, should I do this, or how do I survive? And I think that's influenced like the business we have now. I think we're still aggressive, but we want to make sure we're more structured and planned, because you always have that concern about, will you be replaced, or are you going to be able to deliver the right type of services? And it's that perseverance, I think, that you have to hang on to. You have to believe in yourself. You have to be smart enough to know if you're making bad choices, or if you're doing something that the market doesn't want or isn't willing to pay for or pay enough for. then you have to adapt. And sometimes I would be slow to do that because I was so determined that sometimes I'd make decisions too late. I don't know if that was a good answer for you, but that was a
I think that
Challenging
was
question.
great. You built up that scar tissue and that helped build that resilience. And then you showed over time that perseverance and that persistence paid off. How did those early startup years affect your personal life, family, friendships, just being able to relax when you are building the ship and steering the ship? And were you still able to find enjoyment
yeah.
in those years?
I think my wife understood. I mean, when we met, we literally at Miami in one of the marketing classes that I was using for my independent study. And I think she just understood the kind of the ups and downs of that. So I think that is very helpful. And then you start building relationships with people that I think at one point when once people feel like, okay, there's some viability here, people will root for you and they'll help when they can to help nudge you to that next level. So I think got a lot of friendships that way. I started to travel a little bit, so connected with different people. Back then, I mean, think about this. I mean, we would go to meetings. I mean, when I met Brian, we'd go to his office. We'd sit in the office and talk. I mean, you were constantly interacting with people. And so I think a lot of friendships kind of built from that. I think my family was very supportive of that. I mean, there were ups and downs there, and they would always never say don't do it, but help kind of navigate through some of the guardrails, like how are you going to deal with this? Or I think it's you got to be around the right people because being an entrepreneur, sometimes there's a long road until you're probably at a stage where you feel like, okay, I think we're gonna make it. But I feel, and maybe this is just me, I always have not a fear, but I always worry about what's next. I mean, I always want to iterate and improve because all these trends are coming at you and things change so rapidly. I think you have to be comfortable doing that, and you have to be around friends that can help deal with that. Not bipolar, but you can have ups and downs, and so you got to be around people that can understand when things are good or things are challenging. They got to give you a little bit of leeway there because sometimes it can be unusually stressful because you're so tied into the outcome.
There was times where you and I met. You'd come up to Dayton, or I'd be down in Cincinnati, or whatever. But there was also times where I believe there was at least once that my wife and I and you and your wife we went to a concert down there in Riverbend.
Yeah,
And it was during those just relationship times, we meet each other's better sides in a sense. And it kind of helped just, build a stronger relationship, friendship with that between us, bringing our families into it and things like that. I think we saw Journey and somebody else down there.
yeah. Well, and I think it's like as you make different changes, you start having these people that may have been customers in the past or peers or partners, and there's longevity to that. So even though now you're in a position where maybe our paths aren't economically tied to each other, you can, and you've done this for me, and I know you came and visit us. It's just nice to bounce ideas about what's next, what's in the marketplace, these are a couple different paths we can go down, and where do you think things are going? I mean, it's just nice to have that mentoring and feedback loop where you don't feel like it's something that you maybe couldn't say to a person that you're working with directly. So that network, if you can preserve it and build it, it's invaluable.
Yeah,
And I
some of
think
those relationships we built, like you said, they weren't so close, like, somebody I worked with directly or something like that. Our relationships had that protection layer. Like I remember, I think it was the NCR Senior Open. That's how long ago this was, the NCR part.
yeah,
But John Brookbank and I sat on a hill during that golf tournament and just developed how we were going to install iManage, and it was just, by just those casual, friendly, over a beer, bourbon, whatever it was, but just tossing ideas back and forth. No strains of, I got to sign this, I got to pay this, I got to do this. It was just throwing ideas. And that's just how our bonds, got
yeah.
tighter.
And this will be a shout out to John Brookbank. Let's see if we get him. Maybe you should talk to him on your podcast someday. That is a guy that when I first met you was a direct competitor,
Yes.
but we would meet all the time, and we maintained a long relationship and talked through a lot of different things as he went through correlate and all the different things that are out there. And I think he did a great job of, trying to connect and talk to people that are out there. Even though at some points we were more direct competitors, but even after that had changed over time, still stayed in contact with him. He's another, great resource, great
Yeah.
mentor friend.
So, how do you personally carry the weight of knowing your decisions impact families?
Well, I think that can be a positive. I think as long as I think you have to remember the decisions that you make, and sometimes when we have more economic challenges, that we have to make tougher decisions to preserve the long-term relationships of the greater good of the company. And that can be conflictive because this is a very family environment. I think we take a lot of pride in that if we can improve everyone's skill sets here. So some people might move on and they can have different roles. When there are issues here, we've had several people where family members have passed and we are there. And when my father passed, there were a lot of people here that came through that. And so I think that family element is critically important. I mentioned we bought our building about a year ago, and now we're kind of building out huddle rooms and conference rooms. And we have one is called the Aurora room. And there's a gentleman, his name was Criff Aurora. And he was one of our first employees in the Cebu in Manila, and was really critical in building our teams. And he became the leader of that group. And then a couple of us went out to Cebu, and we had a kind of a weekend excursion. Then tragically, he had a propane tank had exploded, and unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, he had passed. And then I flew back out there and was there for the funeral. And we saw all these people, and they were all there for him, and everyone took care of each other. And so I think having an environment where the culture can support these things, so in good and bad events. And so there's a big plus to this. I think there's a lot of things that can help when families need support. So I'm not saying everything has to be totally integrated unit like a traditional family, but it's close. And so if we're profitable and we have good benefits and we can try to grow what we're doing and have viability, we're helping other people get to that next phase or season of life. And now we have people that have had kids that are graduating and going off and so you're seeing all these things happening, which is another way of saying I'm getting old.
It's the empathy showing, and the humanity of business.
I think
How
yeah,
go
it pays
go ahead.
dividends if you are authentic and if you take care of people, reciprocate that. So one of the ways the companies can grow is when people are going beyond just a traditional job because they want to take care of each other. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Not at all. How do you process failure now compared to earlier in your career?
Or tend to probably internalize it and think about it more, where maybe earlier I would run through more negative scenarios that are out there. One of our key leaders, his name is Bob Supinger. This is something I like about him, is that he can see negative things, but always sets the context of, yes, this happened, but we need to think about this and think about that. So I think maybe more of a balanced approach and giving things time. When a moment occurs that has failure, I think if you can learn from that and adjust, and then you can realize, okay, we can adapt through this. Or maybe when I was younger, it would be more of this, almost you feel like you're you know, just circling, spiraling out of control. I think learning how to break that thought goes a long way. Things end up being okay, but it sure doesn't feel that way when it is happening in that moment. You need time to distance yourself from failure sometimes.
And that's so hard to do, especially when there's an emotional response. But I like how you frame that as an opportunity to update your playbook, essentially. If you can somehow remove the emotion, and I think distance and time are a great way, or at least a great way to help do that.
Yeah. Failures are efficient, and especially if you have them early enough and you can recognize. And I think this is the other negotiation you have to go through. Did I fail because this just was maybe structured incorrectly? Should I try again? Should we try in different ways? And so I think you need to make those assessments as sterilized as possible so the next iteration can be far more for productive. and you can't make it emotional because you make it think like you failed, or maybe it was a bad idea. Maybe what I was thinking was unreasonable, but as long as you can kind of get past that and try it again or do the alternate approach, you can move forward. But I've seen people that just will take a failure and that becomes the reason why they haven't moved forward.
Yeah.
And I think you have to disrupt that. Everyone fails. Yeah, you gotta
I
be
think that's
careful who
where
you compare to. Yep.
I think that's where our wives that we have and our kids, step in with our families when they don't notice, dad's not quite right. He's hitting some struggles. And sometimes they'll just kick us in the ass and say, you're better than that. Let's just go. Let's just do something different. When I've had some of those times with my girls being a girl dad, just, especially when I, watched them grow up. Oh my gosh, being a pops now, the empathy is just leaking out of me,
Yeah.
as far as love and just care and just seeing these little kids growing up and my daughters becoming adults, and responsible and things like that. And you went to a wedding recently, right?
Yeah. My daughter just got married in December,
So
right?
you're
Right.
going to pay that off in like 30 years?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that number can
Yeah,
that can ratchet up pretty quickly.
you can.
And I don't mean to keep talking about my father, but let me tell you this, Brian. And I think the biggest definition of success, when you think about your daughters, especially having daughters. I mean, I have a son and a daughter. If I will view my life as a success if my kids look at me the way I look at my father. So now my father is passed. He's still in my life. I still have those messages. I don't think there's a better gift that you can have than sharing those moments and and I know how committed you have been to your kids. I remember maybe one of the first times I met you at Coolidge, you had created this is like you were meant to be in project management. You had created a spreadsheet about going to Disney, mapping these things out, finding the right rates, the ticket price. How do you combine them in a different way? Because you were focused on what those kids were going to experience. You want to put all those things together. And so you just layer that year over year over year. That will be remembered. And I just think there's just not a better gift to have than that. So sometimes you think about like what you're really good at, which you're good at organizing and documenting information. Like I said, even when I saw this podcast being set up, like this feels like Brian, like it just added all those definitions out there. But again, it's that feedback you get from your girls
Yeah.
that's going to pay dividends forever. It's going to
Yeah.
move on.
For so long, I always worried, did I run them or was I a good parent? And,
Yeah.
you always think of those things, but once they grow up and kind of, I want to say step away because you can ask them. I'll call one of them up every once in a while and say, hey, tell your husband that you're going to spend tonight and tomorrow with me and you're going to sleep in your old bedroom so I can hear you pitter patter around his house again, because, they're all gone. All three girls have moved on in different ways and I miss it. Back then, I think I was more of, complaining or noisy. They didn't get up when they're supposed to, didn't clean this up. I'd give all that away just to come back again.
Yeah.
But I got the grandkids. Now I got them to, fill my life up with that and everything. But no, I got to see them. They work, they have good husbands. Two of them do. One isn't married yet. She's a teacher and she teaches English as a second language. It's like, oh my gosh, so caring and thoughtful about people who are not in the best place in life here in the country.
Yeah.
And, we just didn't do so bad, I guess. I didn't ruin them.
That's a good indicator for success. If you can value that over anything else that you do, that will move on for them. And when they raise their kids, it's the same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we want.
So let's talk cigars for a minute, bourbon and stuff like that, the fun stuff.
All right.
So what have you gotten into lately? What kind of pairings or what kind of interesting
Well, and if you guys ever visit here, we have a humidor here. So we have a pond in the back and we have like Oliva, we have Atabay, we have these different cigars. So we have maybe a couple, maybe 300-400 cigars that will kind of go through some different elements. I like the big gauge cigars, like even like a Churchill, but I smoke so quickly that I need to learn to slow down and relax. But we've done like Blantons and Wellers and some different scotches that are out there. You mentioned like what's the one you
About
just yes, and like the Caribbean cask. So it will, like on a Thursday night, we'll sit outside, especially when the weather is warmer, and just sit around and try these different cigars and just kind of decompress a little bit. And so really, and that is something I truly do enjoy. I'm sure my mother would hate to hear that, but the a cigar with a nice neat bourbon of some sort and just kind of sip away and take some of that time. That's good living. Atabay would be a one to try. That's
okay.
one.
I know that I'm thinking of just another way of connecting with people, trying to do maybe a solo podcast. Not that steel is a problem or anything, but it's just doing like an ad hoc out in the backyard, maybe by a fire, cigar and a bourbon,
Yeah.
and just talk about this is what we recorded this week. We just met with Chad Mattix and we talk about these things. You'll see it soon when the editing's done. And here's what's going to get released next week, or here's what's going on in tech right now. And just 10 minutes, not 30 minutes, not nothing big, long thing, but just something like a casual garage, personal things, and so I'm thinking I'm waiting for the weather to get a little warmer because I think that's what I want to start doing is the outside walking around and get out of this room in a sense and do that. So it'll be
Yeah.
good.
With the right people, a cigar at the right pace, it can be very relaxing, and it can bring all kinds of. We enjoy that time.
Got any vacations coming up?
We go to a place called St. George Island.
Where's that by?
That is in the panhandle of Florida. It's
Okay.
pretty rural, remote. It's by Apalachicola. I'm no longer active, but I'm an instrument rated pilot. They have
Oh,
a
I remember that. No,
yeah,
that's
they have an
right.
airfield
Nice.
there, and always been a dream. I want a Cirrus SR-22 plane. I would love to be able to fly back and forth there. But we typically will rent houses there. We've looked at maybe, but I'm not quite at that point where we want to. And it's like I said, pretty remote. But that might be where we go. My wife and I we've got a few things going on in the house, and some of the work things have been going on. Just get away for a weekend. So, but sometimes those things slip. But yeah, that's probably kind of our go-to place.
You
Yeah,
gotta throw it on the calendar or it won't happen.
yeah. That's the truth. But we typically get a pretty large house, and we want, my daughter, my son, but now my daughter's married and she's got work, and now my son-in-law, he has work, and it's just getting everything together to get everyone to go in the same week. It's very, very challenging.
Yeah, a couple Thanksgivings ago, we went to Disney with the family. And this is funny. I didn't get no spreadsheets out, but my
I was wondering.
daughter did.
Not
She
see.
planned the whole thing out line by line, day by day, hour by hour. And then in 2 more years, we're going again with my grandsons. Going to be 3 by then, I think.
When did you go last? When did you go to? Did you go to Universal? You go to Disney? What's your park of
It's
choice?
right now. It's pretty much been Disney, and at that point, it was we had to be. I kind of spoiled them. We were on the rail, so we stayed at the crap. What's that Hawaiian one called? Polynesian. So that year that I did the spreadsheet, I was supposed to be in something like the Caribbean, something like that, and it was a little cheaper. And they called me up. And I remember precisely. I'm sitting by my pool, and they say we're shutting it down for renovations. So we're going to move you, and they was going to move us to Orleans, to the Orleans one.
Mm.
And I said, my girls don't know what Orleans is. They're young, and this is messing everything up.
I have a spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's expensive. Come on. And they said, well, what are you interested in? And I said, well, Polynesian, which is, I thought, it's a bigger 1-star, 4-star kind of thing. Well, for $50, I don't know where they got $50 over a course of a week, $50 per person, we'll put you in a Polynesian. So we got upgraded to Polynesian. Now you're on the rail. Everything
Yeah,
is
there you go.
really brought to you.
Yeah.
Now that's all they know. To say anywhere else like All Star, or
Yeah.
saying Kissimmee
Good
or anything like
living.
that, they don't even think about that anymore. So I don't have to pay for them anymore. That's the good thing. They have their families. I just pay for my wife and I. But
Well,
this
you
year,
can
in
You can start the spreadsheet now for the grandkids.
Yeah. So this year we're going on a cruise again. We go to a cruise with some friends of ours that live a block over every
How many
year.
cruises have you been on?
Just four so far. Four,
Or
five, five, four or
my
five.
brother has become a cruiser,
Yeah.
and my wife has no interest in that. I will
Really?
tell you, a bucket list for me is in the UK. They have these things called narrowboats. So there's the canals that would,
Yeah.
yeah. And I want to go from pub to pub. I want to be on a narrowboat
That'd be
and,
fun.
and just like spend a month there doing that. It's slow moving. Some people tell me it looks really great, but it's pretty boring. I don't know, but I'd like to try that. But
Just relax.
yeah,
Slow
just
moving is the benefit if you're going from bar to bar.
but what's good about my work, like I mean, Cebu is a beautiful city, and I get to go there, and I've been to many countries, and so I always feel like it's work, but I'll stay and I'll go visit these other things. I think just anytime you go anywhere and just learn about the culture, seeing the beauty of things, and maybe things that you've seen, like the Great Wall. I've walked on the Great Wall. I've been to Tiananmen
Wow.
Square and saw
Yeah.
that stuff, and it's I mean, travel is that'd be that's probably the best thing I think could be good use of your money is seeing and experiencing the world versus maybe owning certain things. It'll stay with you.
So my two new bucket lists are going to the Little League World Series,
Okay. Yep.
Pennsylvania, and going to the next Winter Olympics in the French Alps. That's my
That'd be
next.
a big one. My son and I have gone to the F1 in Vegas for the last 2 years.
That's another one is coming up with me
Yep.
now. It's F1. I'm just now getting into it. I've been to a
Yeah.
few NASCAR events, but somehow my youngest daughter got me interested in looking at it, and now I'm watching all these shows on Apple
Netflix,
TV.
it's great.
Yeah, Netflix and Apple and all of them have things about it. And the new next races, I think first race is this weekend coming.
I think it's so amazing about it because they'll do I mean, it's a team sport, but these drivers are just they're unbelievable. I mean, they're the agility, dexterity, everything goes into that. But that race is done on one tank of gas. It just kills me that the cars are that fast, that much power, and all the decision making they go through it versus like NASCAR where you'll see the fuel stops and stuff like that.
Yeah, the kinetic energy, the braking, builds that in. It's very efficient and they're so young. These guys are 18 to
Yeah.
24 years old.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And it must be unbelievable because they shut down the city. I think the locals hate it, but what an interesting, like with the sphere and seeing all the, like driving by the Bellagio and the fountains are going and just, yeah, you should, that's a
That'd
neat,
be
Like
good. Miami.
construction downtown was a nightmare for traffic. I have family that live that way. Definitely was not thrilled.
no, and I think they view it almost as a negative because it does. I mean, they shut down these screen, they block
Yeah.
everything. So when like you can't just observe it, you have to get the seats. So when you're going over like walkways and on the side roads, they basically block it all off. And so it's a unique event.
I think the most relatable thing for me was watching the movie F1 recently with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm so slow on watching shows and latest trends. I'm surprised F2 isn't out already by the time I got around to watching F1.
But Netflix has that series, like it's 6 or 7 seasons so far,
Yeah.
maybe 8 of F1
Wow. Yeah. See,
races and stuff.
And it's
It's
great to see
remarkable though.
crazy.
Yeah.
Frankie Muniz is like the only F1 driver I know. That tells you how much I know about that sport.
Verstappen, that'd be the one. It's a neat event, and the series is interesting to watch because you can see how the teams struggle and navigate through things. And they've done a great job of branding that, and it's become a big venue in the States because F1 wasn't really big here.
Yeah. Now they're in Miami, New York, Vegas, and Arizona, I think.
Yeah, Austin I thought was one in Vegas.
Oh yeah, Austin was one.
Yep.
They'll stay out of the South because that's NASCAR country and they probably just don't appreciate it there.
It, kind of changing the subject here. Is there a habit, ritual, or practice that has had an outsized impact on your life?
I've kind of gotten a little bit out here again. Maybe I don't realize how much my dad is when I was reading all your questions, it just brought me back to him. When my father passed, I started going to my mom's church. And my mom lives in now Brookville, Ohio, a place called Brookhaven. And it's this church called Salem
But
Church
you
of
live in
God.
Cincinnati.
I live in Cincinnati.
My God, that's a drive.
So I get up, I go to Lifetime Fitness, I do a cycling class, steam, I get in my car and I drive up there and go to church, take a couple 80-year-old women out to lunch, come back home. And I've been doing that for years now.
Well, she's got to appreciate that, though.
Yeah. And so that was an interesting kind of got me back into, because I'm pretty, I grew up in the church, but wasn't, terribly active in it. And so that kind of got me reconnected that way. So I enjoyed that. And, but there's other things that, I try to find hobbies and things like that. I mean, flying was something I really, really wanted to do, but it requires so much structure. But that's something I've been thinking deeply about, trying to get back into that. I liked flying because it just forced you to focus. I mean, when the wheels are up, you got to do what you need to do to be safe and be able to navigate and land safely. But I loved everything that enabled. I've just have struggled with the economics to even tie it into work because, getting certain places like even Nashville. I flew into Nashville a couple of times in a Cessna and I could get there in maybe an hour and a half or whatever. But that was nice to do those things. But it just to keep current and to be safe, it just became problematic. But I'm looking for those things, those more rituals or routines that just kind of keep you grounded. I have season tickets to FC Cincinnati and the Reds, and I would try to go to those games with my kids to keep them connected and for finding things to try to get everyone on the same page. We became big FC Cincinnati fans. I don't know if you've ever been to the games, but soccer is growing here in the US and it's fun to watch that.
I went to one of those games and it was the craziest college event I've seen in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
It is wild how much celebration and camaraderie there is during one of those games.
Yeah, it's a great venue. There's something called the Bailey. They get really riled up, and our team has done pretty well. Inter Miami, they got Messi that came to town, and they've dominated last year. But when I was growing up, did you guys play soccer when you were growing up? Or yeah, I did, but it was
Elementary school.
yeah. It's become a lot more popular now, but it took a long time. Like football, baseball, that's American sports right there. Soccer is taking a lot longer to get, just like maybe like F1.
Yeah. I was with you on getting back to church. I had a couple of events not happen to me, but happen around me. And I was out of church for 15 to 20 years probably. And just because I would blame people for the reasonings, some things happened around me. And I thought, I'm not going to let myself become that stat. God's coming after me some way. Right now he's beating around me. And so I got back in church and I've really relaxed since then. Just that steadiness of going, being where I think I need to be on a Sunday and treating it correctly. And I
It's
think
good tuning. I mean, you get there and you listen to those things. Sometimes I can get you back on track and reset things. So it's a nice.
It is. And it's good that you come up there. That's a drive for you to go up to see your mom because your dad passed. I'm sure your mom appreciates seeing you every Sunday and she probably brags about you and everything else, and that's a good thing, Chad.
Yeah. You don't know how many times you're going to see your parents. I mean, that's a weird, especially as you get, and I just can't believe I'm 55. She got excited because I get discounts at she's naming all these restaurants. Hey, we can go to Perkins. You can get 15% off. And I even qualify for the seniors group at this church that I grew up in, which is just, it's terrible. It's alarming.
No, my son's from class is all 60 to 88-year-olds.
Yeah.
I'll be 60 this May.
It's crazy. I don't feel it. Well, I do feel it. I'll correct that.
You don't get.
Yeah, but there's just certain things that you wear down differently, so.
I mean, I love Bob Evans, and I went there so frequently at one point in time that they would call me the writer because I would bring my laptop, I'd go sit, I would
Yeah.
work for a couple hours, and I would have the farmer's choice and
Yeah, the
just
omelet. Yeah.
type and type and type. And then sometimes they'd come by and they'd talk to me and we'd talk. And I'd say, "Hey, guess what? You survived this chapter."
Well, I go see
Just
my doctor,
great
and I,
time.
I call her my fat doctor because we're trying to get my weight down. And, I would tell her, she'd ask me, like, what do you eat for breakfast? I said, every once in a while, I'll get some biscuits, some, bacon. She goes, you might as well have 10 milkshakes. I'm thinking,
Okay.
10 milkshakes
Okay,
sounds pretty
deal.
good, but I'd rather have the bacon. All right. Well, hey, Chad, this was awesome, man. It's good speaking to you again. It's been a while. Glad. So thank you for coming on the show and talking about, your work and the human side of your story and letting us just sit in on what feels like one of those long conversations that people have in your humidor and they're at work, of cigars and bourbon.
You guys are invited to be there. I thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope you both have great success in the podcast. I think I like the format and the venue, and just like anything, just keep at it, building that content, because I think the topics and things you guys are trying to accomplish is fantastic, and I'm glad to participate, especially kind of early in the process here. So I look forward to seeing what you guys do, and I do appreciate taking the time today or tonight really to
Yeah, I
connect.
appreciate it. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Chad.
For those listening, we'll drop links in the show notes so you can connect with Chad and follow what he's been up to. And if this episode resonates with you, please hit follow or share it with a friend who's in their own season of building and figuring things out. Stick around for more episodes of the Wire Garage with Pops, where we'll be exploring the stories behind technology and the people you'd love to share pour with. Thanks.
Cheers.
All right, John.